Hello, and thank you very much for coming along once again to discuss and explore problems of environment and climate change that we all have to face now as global citizens. This isn't just a question of being isolated in the Northeast and saying it's a good idea for non-governmental groups to get involved in this. It's a crisis issue that we're all going to have to be involved in one way or another. And it's best to start getting equipped to do so, find out what's happening, what's going on around us, and how we can link in to the groups that are becoming active, both in determining policy and in offering alternatives to what's out there now. Today we're going to look at the whole question of what the EPA has become since Pruitt has left, and look a little bit at his legacy. It's called Buyer Beware, Citizens Beware, New Threats to the Environment, Your Health, and Survival Under the Trump Administration. A lot of people applauded the departure of Scott Pruitt, and many were quite happy that it occurred. The problem is that although he goes away, the issues that he made judgments on, passed policies on, and implemented various kinds of regulations about are still with us. And in fact, they still address an agenda that the Trump administration wants to complete. We have to ask what kind of enduring damage has been done and continues to be done under the current administration, even after Pruitt's departure. Well, you can start at this time of year with what you're eating. It's a buyer beware situation. There's been a new study out by the Environmental Working Group called A Shopper's Guide to Pesticides in Produce. You ought to go out to it and click on the material that's there on Transition Studies. The Environmental Working Group's guide to the 2018 shopper about the Dirty 12. What does this mean? Well, it's worth looking at in detail, especially with commonly available things in the summer. Summer's a great time of each year for fresh and healthy and delicious produce. At least you think it's fresh, healthy, and delicious, but it may not be so healthy. If you start looking at the guide that they put out, you begin to realize how many of these things are laced with pesticides. Go out to the website and start looking. I mean, you click on strawberries, for example. One strawberry sample contained an astounding 22 pesticide residues. 1/3 of all conventional strawberry samples contain 10 or more pesticides. Now, when you eat that, that goes into your system and it stays there. Why? Because these are not biodegradable. They interrupt things in your body. They interrupt your reproductive organs, for one thing. They can interrupt the chemical message system, endocrine system in your body that sends around various kinds of messages. Take spinach. We all like spinach in the summer, especially when it's fresh, but here, 97% of conventional spinach samples contain pesticide residues. 97%. That's not even close to, well, take your chances kind of thing. This is pretty darn solid. If you buy conventional spinach, you're going to be ingesting pesticides that don't break down but break out in your body dysfunctionally. Conventional spinach had relatively high concentrations of permethrin, a neurotoxic insecticide. A neurotoxic is one that works on your nervous system. Look down through the whole list. Nectarines. Nearly 94% of nectarine samples contain 2 or more pesticides. One sample of conventionally grown nectarines contained a residue of 15 pesticides. Apples. 90% of conventional apples had detectable pesticide residues. 80% of the apples tested contained diphenylamine, a pesticide banned in Europe. Europeans aren't dumb. They realize what happens here. They realize what American chemical companies are doing to their agriculture, and they ban the stuff. Take a look at all the others: blueberries, peaches, cherries, pears, tomatoes, celery. This is the kind of thing that you'd expect this type of year to get really fresh material that's healthy for you and your children, and in fact it's turning out to be a nightmare. Beware what you're getting. In fact, if you have any chance at all, get the organic alternative. It's the only way out of this. Well, what we recognized under Scott Pruitt was that basically he was banning scientists from the EPA and from advising the EPA on various things. Now, this is not good, because it's the scientists who bring us this information. The Organic Consumers Association, the OCA, has actually tried to start a national petition to tell the EPA preserve laws to protect human health from toxic pesticides produced by companies like Dow Chemical. But EPA is making, under Pruitt, the wrong kind of decision. It's making a decision not to ban the pesticide and several particular pesticides. Take a look at the reporting on this.
Thing one tonight, a pesticide that was expected to be banned by now poisoned a dozen farm workers in California this month.
Top story here at 5. More than 50 farm workers exposed to a pesticide drift this morning southwest of Bakersfield. The incident shut down harvesting operations after some of those workers complained of sudden illness.
Don't wait, particularly if you're suffering from any symptoms, whether it's nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Seek medical attention immediately.
The active ingredient in the insecticide is chlorpyrifos. It is reported to cause severe neurotoxic symptoms in humans if touched, inhaled, or eaten.
The chemical in that pesticide, chlorpyrifos, was banned from household use over a decade ago. And under direction of President Obama, the EPA was on track to ban agricultural use of it earlier this year. But the EPA under President Trump reversed course, and that chemical is still being used. And we know of one person with a special pen who's pretty happy about that.
Should I give this pen to Andrew? Dow Chemical. I think maybe, right?
Okay, there's the CEO of Dow Chemical, and he's sitting right there. And in fact, it's not even a mystery, right? Who's behind this? So I give the pen to the CEO of Dow Chemical? I think so. And everyone applauds. It's not a matter of applause if you know what's going on.
Dow Chemical, the Trump administration, and a dangerous chemical that is unexpectedly still in use. That's thing two in 60 seconds. The EPA made headlines in March when its new chief, Scott Pruitt, rejected the agency's own scientific findings and decided not to ban an insecticide that uses a poisonous chemical despite mounting evidence the chemical caused.
Okay. He ignored his own scientists. In fact, he's kicked them off the advisory boards. And instead, he makes this decision on the basis of what? Well, not on the basis of science anymore, or on the basis of medical advice, but on the basis of who has supported Trump.
Learning and memory declines, particularly among farm workers and young children. A month later, as Mother Jones reports, the chemical poisoned a bunch of farm workers who reported vomiting and nausea. But there was one big winner from Scott Pruitt's decision, Dow Chemical, which sells about 5 million pounds of the substance each year. Dow Chemical had donated $1 million to Trump's inauguration fund, and most recently sent letters to 3 federal agencies asking them to ignore pesticide studies that say their products threaten endangered species.
Okay, you get the idea. Pruitt's doing the dirty work for the administration to, in effect, roll back the ban on the pesticide and allow it to be used. Why? Well, because he gave $1 million to the Trump inaugural ball. Well, let's listen to what happened elsewhere, and you can get a sense of the gravity.
Earlier this month, more than 50 farm workers here in California were exposed to a highly toxic pesticide, whose use was recently green-lighted by the EPA in one of the agency's first decisions since Donald Trump took office. About an hour after workers arrived for their shift at Dan Andrews Farms in Bakersfield, California, many began to exhibit symptoms of vomiting and nausea. At least one person fainted. Observers suspect the source was drift from a nearby orchard that was sprayed the night before with Vulcan, a pesticide containing the known neurotoxin chlorpyrifos.
Now notice it was pesticide drift. It's not anything that they were applying. It was drifting in the wind. And they just happened to be downwind of it. Well, what about civilians that live around the area? What about kids that play around on the roads nearby? This is really dangerous stuff, and it's being permitted.
This is Efron Zavalza, a supervisor and food safety specialist with Dan Andrews Farm, speaking with local station KGET.
Getting an odor, pesticide odor coming in from the mandarin orchards west of our field. I'm not pointing fingers saying that was done incorrectly. It's just it's an unfortunate thing. The way it was drifted. The wind came, pushed everything east, and we were caught in the path.
Last year, the EPA was on the verge of banning chlorpyrifos, a product of Dow Chemical Company. But under EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt, the agency unexpectedly reversed course and approved its use. Multiple studies have found the pesticide causes both immediate symptoms like vomiting, diarrhea, blurred vision, as well as long-term damage in children, such as developmental delays and higher rates of autism. Dow Chemical had asked the Trump administration to reject the findings of government scientists as they prepared a report on how pesticides known as organophosphates threaten human health and thousands of critically endangered species. Organophosphates were originally derived from a nerve agent developed in Nazi Germany. Dow Chemical also paid $1 million to underwrite Donald Trump's January inauguration. And Dow CEO Andrew Liveris was tapped by President Trump to head the White House's American Manufacturing Council. Well, for more, we're joined by two guests at the University of California, Berkeley TV studios.
Okay, I'd urge you to listen to the interviews that she takes on here by two experts that actually were critical of the decision, but particularly critical of spreading this kind of poison around farm workers' communities and its residues on crops. Crops that you and I eat, they're all coming from California, but take a look at where your vegetables come from in what's called the conventional aisle of whatever store you're in. Even Whole Foods has conventional material, and it's largely coming from California. You can expect residues will be on it. Very, very serious. In fact, so serious that the Journal of the American Medical Association has carried news on it, pointing out that this is back in 2011, this is not brand new breaking news, this is well-known stuff by the medical community. Pesticides linked with children's lower IQ scores. Listen to a lawyer take on the issue.
Hi, I'm Mike Papantonio, and this is America's Lawyer. Earlier this year, the EPA decided that they were not going to ban a commonly used pesticide called chlorpyrifos. The pesticide had been a constant state of jeopardy with the U.S. regulatory agencies for years, and newly appointed EPA Chief Scott Pruitt decided to end the discussion once and for all by saying that, hey, it's a good pesticide, we're going to let it go. There's a very good reason why this pesticide has been in limbo for so long. Scientific reports on the toxicity of this compound were showing that it had the potential to severely damage the brains of children, and reports were showing that thousands of people across the globe were dying every year because of exposure to this chemical. Tonight, we'll tell you the story on how a major chemical company duped the public again, duped the EPA in order to keep their highly profitable toxin on the market and in your body. In 1965, Dow AgroSciences bought a pesticide called chlorpyrifos. It brought it to the market. The pesticide became widely used on crops all over the world due to how effective it was at killing mosquitoes, ants, roaches, and other insects that pose a threat to the global food supply. 52 years after it was first introduced, the pesticide is used in more than 100 countries around the globe on more than 50 different kinds of commercial crops. If you live in the United States and you've eaten apples, lettuce, peaches, oranges, bananas, or potatoes in the last 50 years, chances are you've been eating food that's been sprayed with this chemical. The EPA estimated that between 1987 and 1998, about 21 million pounds of this pesticide were used annually in the U.S. By 2007, chlorpyrifos was the most commonly used organophosphate pesticide in the United States, with an estimated 8 to 11 million pounds. 8 to 11 million pounds applied to our food and non-residential turf like golf courses. Like most pesticides, it's a neurotoxin that disrupts the normal function of the nervous system in insects, leading to death. But as years of scientific research is now telling us, this dangerous pesticide can also act as a neurotoxin in human beings. Even though Dow Chemical claims, of course, that their pesticide is completely harmless to human beings at normal doses, we've heard that before, science tells us that exposure can cause very serious and very permanent damage to the nervous system of people who are exposed. Experimental animal studies suggest that infants and children are more susceptible than adults to the effects of low exposure.
Well, that's obvious in a way because their organisms are smaller and less developed. And they metabolize things more quickly. That is, they ingest these non-biodegradable entities and they become fixed in their tissues since they can't degrade. It's really quite staggering. It's not Dow Chemical alone, but in particular Monsanto has been colluding with EPA officials for a while, well back into the Obama administration, to make sure that Roundup and the chemical it's based on is spread around the country. Take a look.
Herbicide glyphosate is very effective at killing weeds. On a small scale, you probably spray Roundup or something similar in your garden to keep the weeds at bay.
If you do, you're nuts, because you're poisoning your own environment with a known carcinogen. You're inviting cancer. If you use this in your own backyard, stop now. Get rid of your stocks of it and turn to integrated pest management.
On a large scale, the U.S. Geological Survey says glyphosate was used on 300 million crops in 2012. The last year data is available. As you can see, the use of glyphosate has grown tremendously over the years. Now, back in June, the EPA said there is no convincing evidence glyphosate is an endocrine disruptor. Should be good news, as endocrine disruption has been linked to cancer, fertility issues, and diabetes. A senior science fellow at Monsanto said, "I was happy to see the safety profile of one of our products was upheld by an independent regulatory agency." Funny he should use the word independent. As The Intercept found out of the 32 studies the EPA used to come to this conclusion, 27 of them are conducted or funded by industry, many of them sponsored by Monsanto.
Okay. The studies that EPA is using are the studies done by Monsanto. Now that kind of infiltration of the regulatory process is absolutely staggering and corrupt.
An EPA official is facing allegations he sought to stop an investigation into Monsanto's Roundup. Official Jess Rowland was in charge of testing the cancer risks of the herbicide. But according to a court filing, Rowland reportedly told a Monsanto manager on a conference call in 2015, quote, "If I can kill it, I should get a medal," in reference to an investigation into the chemicals in Roundup. A federal judge says Rowland appeared to have a, quote, "highly suspicious relationship with Monsanto." Rowland also oversaw a committee that found there was not enough evidence to conclude glyphosate, one of the key chemicals in Roundup, causes
Cancer. Well, these kind of internal reviews supposedly are in fact are done by the chemical companies themselves, and that's what's very clear now with Monsanto. These kill not only insects but people and pollinators. This is absolutely crucial. These are the things needed in agriculture to pollinate the crops. Bees, butterflies, and the like. These are killed in the process of spraying for ants and roaches and things like that. The result is you're killing off your best allies in agriculture. you're using this neonicotine pesticides, and they're showing up in the drinking water, as the BBC has started to report. Now, the EPA under Pruitt really didn't want you to know about what was in the drinking water, about all of the chemicals that are, in fact, poisoning the waterways. And he intervened to keep you from knowing.
Wednesday's hearing came only 2 days after Politico reported the Environmental Protection Agency and the White House has suppressed publication of a federal health study on a national water contamination crisis. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services study found the chemicals PFOA and PFOS, which are used in Teflon and firefighting foam, are unsafe for human health at levels the EPA had previously called safe. In other words, these chemicals are more dangerous than previously thought. But internal emails released after a Freedom of Information Act request show a Trump administration aide warning the EPA's top financial officer, quote, "The public, media, and congressional reaction to these numbers is going to be huge. The impact to EPA and DOD is going to be extremely painful. We, DOD and EPA, cannot seem to get ATSDR, that's the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, to realize the potential public relations nightmare this is going to be."
Yeah, it's a public relations nightmare, because if the public realized what was going on with the chemicals in our water supply, they'd be outraged. And for this reason, when they hold a press conference on it, they ban journalists from attending. It's really striking.
Officials of the Environmental Protection Agency barred multiple journalists from covering an EPA summit on water contamination at EPA's D.C. headquarters Tuesday, with one journalist reporting she was shoved out of the building by security guards. The reporters were from CNN, the Associated Press, and A&E News.
Now, this isn't just one report. CNN reports on it.
Today, the
itself.
Environmental Protection Agency barred members of the news media, including CNN, from a national summit on harmful chemicals in drinking water. Joined now by CNN Money senior media reporter Oliver Darcy. This is pretty shocking stuff, Oliver. What happened?
Yeah, it's certainly shocking, Wolf. Several journalists, when they were trying to cover this EPA event where Scott Pruitt was speaking, were blocked entry by security and told that they could not enter the event.
Well, okay. How is the public going to find out if the journalists are forbidden from entering the events that speak about? Well, take a look at other kinds of water contamination like fracking in Texas and Pennsylvania. In effect, the future of U.S. water supply is in jeopardy. There's toxics moving in from all sides, including lead, like Flint, Michigan, in many places around the country, more serious than Flint, Michigan, more elevated in their levels. Well, the Trump EPA needs to protect us from toxins, but the new EPA director is likely to keep the old tradition going. In fact, he's quite known for this.
So now we have Andrew Wheeler coming in to be the acting administrator. Andrew Wheeler's going to pursue the same policy agenda that Pruitt pursued.
And with a vengeance, because he's from the coal industry and has particular links to expanding the use of coal. Well, that touches upon air quality, and the Journal of the American Medical Association has looked at that again. In fact, they listed in a very nice table the rollbacks on regulations from the EPA in water, air, and the like. And former EPA officials are warning the public about the anti-science agenda that has harmed the nation. Pruitt's policies include pesticides in your foods, pesticides in agricultural workers, pesticides that kill pollinators, public water supplies infected with them, increased fracking, and toxic chemicals in effect released without anybody knowing about them, because you keep the press from the release information. This is really quite staggering, and it's going to take a new kind of citizen science alliance to get beyond this. This is why we need this kind of citizen science alliance around the world for a just and sustainable future.